Hey there, everybody. I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and yes, I am back from a short break to bring you this 88th episode of the Weekly Ratchet. Sure, yeah, fine. I don't know what episode number this is. I don't even really know what day or even what time it is, but I do know that it's all going to get better as long as we have some board games. Hey there, everybody. How y'all doing? I hope you've all had a good week or two of getting to play some games with family and or friends. This is going to be, I think, a bit more of a casual episode of the Weekly Ratchet. It has been a difficult 2 weeks, or really, honestly, a difficult previous week. I've just, it's been tough. I'm really tired. This job's been difficult. I'm not adjusting well. I had a little bit of just a mental fatigue that hit me Thursday. I'm feeling better. It's been a good weekend, and I'm looking forward to the coming week. Hey, Christmas is upon us, and I hope that everyone is looking forward to a nice Christmas holiday, and I hope everyone has a good Christmas holiday. I'll share some good news. The house things are moving very rapidly. 2 weeks ago, actually, we had the house inspected, and things actually came back really good. The back deck is going to need replaced, and that will be, super affordable. But Greg of the Meeple Society said he was going to come out and do it for me all pro bono, no problem. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be great. What do you mean, Greg, you didn't agree to that? You're a liar. So anyways, that's what's been going on there. We actually are supposed to close on January 5th. And I don't really see any reason at this point that's not going to happen. I will at some point, actually going to be there tomorrow to meet with some contractors, but I will at some point try to get you guys some footage. It'll probably be after the 5th. I'll kind of walk around with a camera and give you a little bit of a quick tour of the place, and you can see hopefully what it's going to come from. And then you'll get to see what it gets to, I think, at some point in the future. Anyways, is there anything else really here to cover at the top of the show? Yeah, I didn't do an episode last weekend. It really wasn't because I didn't want to. It wasn't because, I had a bad week or anything. I didn't get to play any games. Only one little game came in. I didn't really think it was worth it. I'm still not sure it's worth it. I'll go ahead and actually mention it now. The one game that came in, this is Flamecraft, Dragons and Dragons. It's actually an expansion, a little micro expansion to the game of Flamecraft. We have already played this, or played the game with this, I should say. And so I'll chat about that here in just a little bit. Other than that, I will mention, of course, that there is a move coming up for us, which is terrifying. I can't wrap my head around how we're going to do this with the work and everything else. Things will go offline. Obviously, you're probably not going to see me for a good month, maybe a little bit more. I don't know what the studio setup's going to look like over there. I have an idea, but I don't think the budget's going to be there to let it happen. We're just going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to wait and see together how that's going to go. Anyways, you know what? That's it for new games. I think that's it for the nonsense here at the top of the show. I'm maybe a little rusty from being off for a week of doing some filming. So let's go ahead and get to question of the week. All right, last week, numbers were fairly low. I'm assuming with the holidays and such going on, there just hasn't been that much viewership there on YouTube. I'll say, hey, the numbers haven't gone down, so that's, a good thing. But not a lot of comments to question of the week from last week, where I asked you to name a game that you would define as easy to learn, but hard to master, and maybe a little bit of why. Up first was Wayne Kruger, who said Concordia, one of his favorite games. He said on the surface, it's play a card and do what it says. But in reality, it's about hidden scoring, long-term economic planning, and anticipating the moves of your opponents. All of which I suck at. Concordia was actually one of the first games that I ever played against other players that weren't like my family. I want to say that I went to an event here in the Richmond area, and it wasn't the first game I had played with, kind of like strangers, if you will. That was Everdell with my now friend Chris Mutton and Winston. But this was another one of those. I went to a different game night, met some new people. We decided to play Concordia. I had played it online, and that was the only place I had played it. And I think I had played that even with my wife, if I recall. And anyways, rambling on here. And I have visited Concordia again. And every time I sit down to it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is like Concordia. This is like this. I mean, it's almost like I don't want to say an evergreen game, but it's got its cult following. It's a game that has hung in there in terms of popularity over many years. I don't know when that game came out, but it's not, a recent title by any means. And I'm always like, oh god, I'm getting to play Concordia. Like, it's Concordia. This is the game, right? And then I play it, and I'm like, this game is like, what am I doing? I do not understand Concordia. I mean, you're right. It's play a card and do what it says. And I really do like the idea that as you're acquiring more of those cards have their own scoring. Although, if I remember, what the card lets you do is not then what that card scores. It's kind of like offset. It's like you kind of need the next card in that sequence to then score off of what this card does, if I remember. And I might be wrong about that because it has been a while since I played it. I had it, and then with the last play of it, I realized just how bad I am at it. And I went ahead and I got rid of my copy. It's a neat game, and I respect the game. I know it's a very popular game, but I think that I need to play that thing like 100 times to understand it. And I just don't, this is never going to happen for me. For good old Concordia. Wonderflonium said the gang, that it has easy rules, but then the entire group of players has to develop its own way of playing and communicating, or meta, to figure out how to communicate the relative strength of their poker hands. Now, I had to look this one up. This game came out last year. It is for those who don't know, it's a Texas Hold'em style game, but it's cooperative because you're basically bidding not on your own hand, but sort of on where your hand fits, like score-wise, value-wise, strength-wise, as far as Texas Hold'em goes, with everyone else at the table. So I'm assuming, and I read a quick synopsis on this, so I may be a little off in here, but I'm assuming if you've got, a pair of cards, you may have one of the weaker cards, although honestly a pair is one of the most frequent, I think, hands that you get in Texas Hold'em, right? But if it's like a pair of twos, then obviously it's a pretty low value. And so you've got to try and figure out, like, do you have the lowest value at that table? Or might someone literally just have like ace high and you would beat them? And it sounds really interesting. I was checking this one out because I do know how to play Texas Hold'em. It's been a long time since I played it, but it's one of those games where, even like Yahtzee Texas Hold'em, which I used to play quite a lot, but it's a game that doesn't work at 2. And I wondered if this game works at 2. It apparently doesn't, at least 3 players, and BGG seems to suggest it's best at 5 or higher. So not going to be able to check this one out either, but it's an interesting concept, and I could see that being pretty popular. And I don't know how that communication thing works. Obviously, I didn't get that far into the explanation of it, but I can imagine that, yes, that's got to be something that you probably just can't sit down to a convention and play that. You've got to really play with people that you know, and you know each other, and you're able to kind of establish that method of communication. Anyways, Teshra named cooperative deduction games like The Crew, Bomb Busters, and Take Time, suggesting that the complexity of those games lies not in their rules, but in the fact that there is no singular best strategy for which players to approach them. He mentioned in that write-up at the beginning of Bomb Busters, whenever you start a round of Bomb Busters, you get to reveal one of your wires. You basically kind of like immediately just tell everyone at the table, this is my 4. And he mentioned in there that it's that opening move can say so much. And it seems that there are some obvious things to reveal at the beginning of the game. You only get to reveal one thing, but that you can still mess that up. You can reveal something that then makes players think something other than what they should. If there's a bad wire next to your current wire, and this isn't a spoiler or anything because this is fairly early in the game that you get to the red wires or whatever else. but you may play a 7, and the 7.5 is the red wire. And so everyone's going to think, oh, I bet you that one right next to that is the red wire. And you're like, oh, no, I just meant to say that, like, that's the only 7 I have or something, or that's the middle of my range. And then all of a sudden you got people thinking the wrong thing. And so it's one of those things where it's such an easy first step. Just mark one of your wires. But it can really make you sit there and ponder, what do I really need to communicate with this one piece? D. Evergrace named Foundations of Rome, as it has just 3 actions, but the interaction between those actions creates the complexity, adding that you have to be a bit tactical with your actions as the game state changes from turn to turn. That game, I don't know about that one. I have played Foundations of Rome a number of times. It's been a little while since I played it because honestly, I just didn't really care for it. You're right. It has 3 actions. The actions are fairly simple. You're either generating income, you're buying a deed as they kind of flop out from this deck, or you can build a building. I believe that's it. Like I said, it's been a little while since I played it. And the couple of times that I've played it, I remember thinking like, oh, what am I supposed to be focusing on? Like the buildings that you build, they may increase your income. They also increase your population. That turns to end game scoring I should say mid game scoring and end game scoring, because you score that multiple times throughout the game. And so it's like, if you're doing well with the population, you can score a lot of points. But of course, if you don't have money coming in from income, then it becomes very hard to buy those deeds when they come out, or you're just kind of left buying the scraps that other people either can't or don't want to afford at that moment. But the more and more I played it, and the more I kind of sort of picked apart what was going on, it just always felt to me like pure dumb luck. Because, you can be holding out for just that right tile to come out, that right card to come out, so I can buy this property and I can plunk down this big building and it's adjacent to all these other buildings. That's going to do really, really well for me. And then it's the last card in the deck, right? And you have no shot of ever getting that done. Or you think that you're going to build something, maybe you put something out, and then, again, someone snags up a property right next to you and they score a ton of points on it because you building that building there actually helped them in some way, and I just don't know. I played another game recently, actually I'll talk about it here in a moment, that reminded me a lot of Foundations of Rome. And I was wondering the same thing, like I'm enjoying this, but is it just because I'm getting really lucky? And that's how I've kind of felt with this game. I don't know. I'm with you too. That game was way too expensive. I think it was one of the first $300 games that we ever saw on Kickstarter because it was so expensive. And that was many years ago now that came out. I don't know about that one. It's an easy to learn game, but I don't know if it's actually hard to master or if it's just hard to get the luck to go your way. Anyways, I thought about this one, and it's difficult for me to name such a game because I think about a lot of games that are hard to learn and hard to master. But I kind of glanced around the room here a little bit just before I sat down to film, and I think I'm going to go with Wormholes by AEG. I don't remember the name of the designer of that one, but it is by no means the easiest to learn or the harder to master. It's really neither of those things. It is a very approachable game. But what I've had a lot of fun with Wormholes, the reason I've had a lot of fun with it is that there are a lot of different strategies to kind of experiment with. And I've talked about this in other sort of reviews of that game, comments about that game, and that you can, it's a game where it's just pick up and deliver. That's all it is. But you're using wormholes to jump all over the place. And there is, of course, a tactic where you can sort of group all of your wormholes at one end right next to each other. And it lets you kind of create a hub that you can jump out to all the different areas of the galaxy and eventually be able to move around fairly quickly. I've also tried a sort of a series where you can, this planet takes it to that planet takes it to here, and you kind of build like this highway of these portals. And I've tried that before. And of course, I've also tried to place it in areas where, okay, maybe my opponents have some wormholes here and I can use theirs. Yeah, I'm going to give them a point. But again, if it makes me really flexible, if it lets me move around very quickly and cover a lot of distance in a short period of time, a short number of actions, then maybe that would let me overcome the couple of points that I'm sending their way. And so many times I played that game and I still just make huge mistakes. Like, oh, that wasn't what I meant to do. Or I forgot to drop the wormhole over there, And so it's just one of those games where every time I've played it, I've tried things a little differently. Of course, the board also sets up differently every time you play. And that's really exciting. And that is just a game that it's easy to teach. It's fun to teach. I think it's fun to play. But then as you start to get into it, you're like, oh, what really is the best way to do? Oh, man, I don't know which way to go here. And that's just, I find that really interesting. Anyways, that is question of the week. Let's go ahead and get to some recently played games. All right, really quickly here, I will mention the Flamecraft with the Dragons and Dragons expansion. My wife and daughter and I played this actually last week. And I've talked about this game plenty of times. I don't think I need to get into it in too much detail. It is a worker movement game. You're going to be going to these different shops around this beautifully illustrated town. This central mat in the middle of the table. This is in the base game. This is not an upgrade. There are some upgraded components here for sure. But most of what you see, especially art-wise, is in the retail copy of this game. And you're going to these shops to collect a bunch of resources, ultimately turning in those resources to fulfill orders, essentially. And of course, just doing all that to try and grab points in a bunch of different ways. I also think that this is a game that you have to be a bit tactical with, because as certain shops pop out, as certain cards configurations kind of get set up in certain shops, you might suddenly see a very powerful, a very high scoring opportunity open up that if you don't grab, someone likely at some point will. And so you've really got to be paying attention. The Dragons and Dragons expansion really honestly adds very little. It adds another set of each one of the 6 dragon cards. There are 6 different resources. Each dragon relates to a specific resource, and each of those dragon types has the same action on that card. So there's this idea where you fire up these dragons when you go to some of these shops and use their action, but any light blue dragon on the board has the same effect. They have different names, they have different artwork. Again, they are gorgeous, but they all do the same thing. It adds another set of the dragons, which it literally tells you can do that to make the game longer. This game did not need to be longer. I don't really know why they did that. Plus the fact there are multiple game end triggers, and I have found that usually those 2 triggers get very, very close to happening at the same time. So I don't really know, unless there's something that changed that rule, maybe I missed it. I think that, having extra set of dragons means that you're not going to run out of those cards as early, but then you're likely going to run out of the other set of enchantment or the orders that you're fulfilling. You're going to run out of those orders maybe a turn or 2 or 3 later anyway. So I don't really think it's going to add that much time to the game. The other thing that this adds, and I forgot to mention, this was basically an add-on to another game that they released called Flamecraft Duels. And it was an idea, it's this very sort of light, abstract kind of a token playing. I don't think it's a memory game, but it's some sort of a pattern making game or something like that. I heard that it's very, very lightweight, and I just don't have really time or space or need for those kinds of games anymore. So I didn't get it. I almost missed that this was an add-on, so I grabbed it. But anyways, in that Duels idea, it does add dragon cards that now function as 2 different resources. So you get a dragon that can function as the purple potion and the green, mint leaf or whatever it is. But then, of course, you start to run into some weirdness right away, because there are some things that say, well, if you've got the most purple dragons, well, does that count if you have both? But also, if there are things at the end that says, okay, well, if there are more purple dragons than any other dragon, but maybe you've got a purple dragon and it's also green, and both of those are tied. You know what I mean? Like, it just creates a couple of weirdness, a couple of weird fringe cases that can happen. It tries to do a decent job explaining them in the rules, but even we ran into an example or 2 that we just couldn't quite figure out how it was supposed to work. What I did like about those dragons, now, unfortunately, you only add 6 to any given game. There are, I think, 30 or so in this little box. And again, they're all uniquely illustrated, and I believe each of them actually has their own unique power, which is really cool, but you only ever play with 6 of them in any given game. And in fact, there are kind of like these, I think it called them teams. And so it literally says, okay, pick the team that you want to play with and put those 6 specific dragons into the game. And they're supposed to kind of work off of each other in slightly unique ways. One thing I always kind of wish that Flamecraft did was have a little bit more variety in those dragon abilities. I'm glad that it's here, but the fact that there's only 6 of them still kind of felt like a little bit of a buzzkill. It did also add a couple new shop types. There is one that sits off on the end of the board. It actually kind of has a little bit of a Cthulhu vibe to it for those who might, be interested in that. And what it does is that when you enchant, when you fulfill one of those orders, you may possibly spend an extra couple of resources to take one of these cards. It gives you an immediate, usually a pretty powerful ability, maybe some extra scoring, whatever. Those were kind of nice. It did add a unique tension to go, okay, well, I want to go ahead and fulfill that order because maybe I see that this player is getting real close to doing it, but then I'm not going to have the resources to fulfill that bonus, to grab that bonus ability. Do I want to try and wait one more turn, see if I can get it all done, quickly? And so that angst was kind of interesting, kind of exciting. There was another store that it added that lets you put like 6 dragons out, and we never used it. It just never really jived with anyone. Plus, like the game, as you can probably see from these photos, is starting to take up a ton of space. Now that you're putting these extra shops at the end, it's really just starting to become way more of a table hog than a game of this relative simplicity needs to have. I still love Flamecraft, without a doubt. I don't think this is essential in any way, shape, or form, but if you were looking for just a little more opportunity, a little bit more challenge, just a little bit, those dual mode dragons might provide that. So that is Dragons and Dragons expansion to Flamecraft. Up next, good old Tony Lawhorn. Here we go, buddy. We broke out and played Bunny Kingdom. And this is only the second time I've ever played this game. The first time I played this was easily over 4 years ago. Played this, we didn't even live at this house yet. This is a game very similar to Foundations of Rome. You've got this large square sort of grid-based board. In fact, it literally has a grid address, almost like an Excel spreadsheet. I think it's A through maybe G or H, or maybe even I don't remember. And you're going to be drafting these cards. Everyone gets 12 cards in a 3-player game. I think you get 10 in a 4, or is it up to 5? No, just a 4-player game. And there is a 2-player variant, which I'll try to remember to circle back to real quick. I played the 2-player variant, but it was a long time ago. But I can at least briefly mention the differences. Anyways, you're going to get these 12 cards. You choose 2 of them. You pass the rest to your left. You keep doing this until you're down to your last 2 cards. You then play all the cards that you have. If at any point during that drafting, if you draft a simple address card, say again, A5, then you would take one of your rabbits, just like the little deeds in Foundations of Rome, and you put a rabbit at that space, and you now control that space. It can never get taken from you. There is no cost to do that. So you're not buying these spaces. You just kind of like came up with the control of it, right? You just sort of found it. At the end of that drafting phase, you're going to then take all the cards that you have not immediately claimed. If they were not, again, like an address location, you'll play those cards out in front of you. And those cards then you sort of go into a construction phase. And so if you have a card that has a castle on it, you can build a castle on any of your locations, kind of wherever you choose. If you found a rare resource, you can basically kind of place that resource wherever you want, although a lot of those will have a specific type of environment that they have to be built on. So you've got farm fields with little carrots on them. You've got water tiles. You've got mountain tiles. You've got forest tiles. There may be another 1 or 2 in there. And so it may say, okay, well, you found gold, but the gold has to be in a mountain tile. So if you don't currently control a mountain region, or maybe you have one, but it's not in a very good location, you can just wait and say, you know what, I've got this gold mine and I will find it later. And there are other things that you can build in this game. The whole idea is at the end of each of those drafting phases, after all those 12 cards or 10 cards or whatever have been passed around, You then do a scoring. You do any construction you want to do, and then you score all of your fiefdoms with these rabbits. The way that the fiefdoms score, I mentioned the castles. The castles have, let's just say, very phallic looking like spires that stick off of them. And you got level 1, level 2, level 3, and each of those levels has that number of these little carrot-shaped pointy things sticking up in the air. Behave. Not that I will. But you're going to multiply the number of those literal towers that are sticking up all over the board in each region. So you got to have a region of these grid spaces that are connected. So if I've got kind of 5 spaces in a little S, and the one has a level 3 castle, the other one has a level 1 castle, that's a grand total of 4 carrots sticking up in the air. Again, castle, tower sticking up in the air. But if only one of those resources, one of those spaces generates a resource, let's say that there's a carrot field in the middle of there, then I'm going to multiply the number of towers by the number of unique resources in that fiefdom, that 5 grid that I mentioned. And that's how many points I get. So that'd be 4 points. If later on I discover some sort of a rare material, or again, if maybe I expand into another region and that region generates fish, well, now I would have theoretically 4 times 2 or 8 points off of that region, off that fiefdom. What's interesting with it, and it really does start to make you think, is you start to kind of understand the scoring system. You think, well, I want to have really big, massive kingdoms. Well, no, not really. You want to have a bunch of tight kingdoms that you can upgrade with some castles, and you can actually get control of some castles or some level 1 castles immediately on the board from setup. So you can kind of start off with a level 1 castle. But you want to try and get unique resources. So again, if you build this really, really massive kingdom and you've got 4 or 5 different carrot fields in there, you've only got carrots. You've got 1 unique resource. And so it doesn't matter, you build a whole bunch of castles in there, it's not really going to help you. But if you do what I did, where I had 1 very large fiefdom that had the 3 core resources, wood, fish, and carrots, but then I also found 4 or 5 different rare resources through drafting those cards, and I built them all in that fiefdom. I then got something like 7 or 8 towers built in there, and in the last 2 rounds of the game scored something like 50 and ultimately 60 points off of that 1 kingdom, and just ended up with this massive lead at scoring at the end of the game. And even then, I got to the point where I could not make that kingdom worth any more points unless I kept building castles. And I then kind of realized, well, hey, look, if instead of putting a castle there, yeah, I can get a bunch of points. But maybe if I put it down here in this castle and this other fiefdom, if I add that castle there, I can basically start to make another very valuable fiefdom and score off of it as well. But again, as I kind of alluded to in Question of the Week, I was getting all those rare resources. I was getting all these castle cards because my wife and daughter didn't immediately see the value in some of those cards. And so they were passing cards to me, not really realizing what they were giving up. They were, I think, very much focused in expanding. And they just weren't really thinking about the fact that we just keep giving Jeff all these really rare resources, which is, again, that's another multiplier to the value of one of my kingdoms. And they just weren't really thinking it through. Now, the other cool thing is that my daughter, I believe, actually came in 2nd place because at the end game scoring, she picked up about 100 points. She had gotten, there are also these cards that kind of give you like an end game scoring. Some of them are actually meet a goal. Some of them are just literally get 6 points. But she got a card that said she basically got to double all of her trophies, which were our treasure cards. And none of us were keeping the treasure cards because it was 1 point, 2 points, 6 points, 4 points. Well, she was getting all of them. And unbeknownst to any of us, doubling the score of all of them. And then she got some other card that was like score for every scoring card that you have. And all of those treasures and everything else that she was hoarding was giving her points. And so she was way last place as we went in the final scoring. And in final scoring, she just rocketed up the scoreboard. And she was very proud of herself, and for good reason. And so she did enjoy it. And I did like this play, although I just think that, again, like, I was getting very lucky in the cards that I was drawing. I was getting very lucky in the cards that were being passed to me. And I felt like a lot of my success was just due to luck and maybe a slight lack of experience of the other players around the table. It would not have gone that well with some of my more, seasoned gamer friends. Real quick on the two-player version, the way that the two-player version works is you get dealt a hand of cards, but you also have a little separate hand of cards. And in each of the rounds, I think you add one of your own cards into your hand. You choose one or two of those cards to play, and then you choose a card to just trash out of the game. And so as Shut Up and Sit Down talked about it a long time ago when they reviewed this game, they described the two-player game as being very, very vicious because, I'm going to pick the cards I play, but I'm going to literally pick a card that you would probably want and kick it out of the game. And so it can become a bit more cutthroat. Now, I don't know because, if you're paying a ton of attention to what your opponents are doing, and you probably need to in a game like this, yes, that might be beneficial, but you're only kicking out one card. Now, can it be a super, super powerful card? Yes. There are also cards in the game called camp cards, and they let you claim a territory that you do not have the card to. But if someone else then gets that card and it's not you, they take that territory from you, and there's nothing that you can do to stop it. So I don't remember those camps. I really don't from the previous play, but they would actually help mitigate, I think, some of that evilness. So I probably need to go back and play this again with my wife at 2 and see how we feel about it. There is also an expansion of this. It has something to do with, like, in the clouds. I remember it being a very psychedelic looking expansion. I don't know if I'm going to bother with that. I will say real quick, and I'm going to wrap this up, but the one thing that I know people don't like about this game, and I can certainly understand it, is that it is, at the end of each of those rounds, looking at every one of your little regions and trying to figure out, okay, what's connected and what's not connected. There are also these little lava paths on the board that can actually break up so that two adjacent sectors aren't actually adjacent. And so taking those into consideration can be a little bit of a mind mess. But especially towards the end, when there's just rabbits all over the damn place and there's tokens all over the damn place, keeping track of what you've already counted and what you haven't, and is that actually part of this region or is it not, for each of those scoring sort of rounds is really complicated and messy and fiddly, especially in that last round. I think it would be even worse at the 4-player count. We didn't have too much trouble with it, but honestly, again, my wife and daughter didn't do quite as well with the large fiefdoms, and so maybe that kept it from being quite as bad. I think if we were all on more equal footing, it might have been really, really difficult to score that last round. But anyways, I did enjoy it. You know what? I'm glad I picked it up again. I talked about this in the previous episode. This is a game that I've always sort of wanted to revisit. I had a copy. That first play, we didn't do well with it. We got rid of it. I finally just recently reacquired it, and I did like it. Even my wife said, I didn't really remember the game. But that was kind of fun. Also, it's from Richard Garfield. What? I did not remember that. All right. Over the weekend, there was a local game event at a local library here in town, maybe about, 20 minutes from me. A local gamer by the name of Mark hosts sessions at this library every couple of months. It's just kind of free to go. He even sets up, just kind of like some old games. People can kind of bring games they just want to get rid of. I didn't actually know about that. I would have brought some stuff to get rid of. But anyways, I was looking forward to doing this because I haven't gotten to play a lot of games lately. My buddy Chris Munton was there, and he has been bugging me to play the game of 11, and I believe it's called Football Manager Board Game, if I remember, is the sort of subtitle to that game. This is from Portal. The designer's name, I'm going to assume, is Thomas Janssen. And I say that because I'm pretty sure he's from like New Zealand or something like that. So it's probably not just a standard English name. But it's from Portal Games. And in this game, you are managing a soccer team. Yes, 11 Football Manager Board Game. An interesting title. There's a lot to this, and I don't plan on going into the complexity or into a lot of the rules, and I always say that. But each player has 3 boards in front of them, and each of these boards is probably about that big. You've got a stadium board where you can build and sort of upgrade your stadium. It's got 2 bleachers for your fans. It's got 2 spots you can advertise. That's kind of funny. And then it's got 4 spots you can upgrade. There's even an office that you can kind of pay to upgrade. And there's a little slot in the side where you can tuck a card that kind of establishes like what the uniform looks like for your team. The middle board is sort of like the business end of things. You've got 3 card slots in there for your team owners. You're drafting those at the very beginning of the game. They give you maybe some ongoing benefits or maybe an action that you can trigger or just something that you get at the very beginning of the game. And that's basically it. You've got a slot at the bottom of the board to put in staff members. And these are people who kind of do the same thing. They're going to give you either actions that you can take, an ongoing benefit that you just got to have almost like an engine building idea. And so on and so forth. And there's other things on that middle board. I honestly can't remember what all is there. There is a financial track where you're keeping track of the number of players that you have hired for your team, the number of staff members that you have hired for your sort of business, and the various upgrades that you have made to your stadium. And as those things increase, your operating costs increase. You have to pay that at the end of each round. The right board is literally your field within the stadium. And that is actually where you're going to play soccer matches in each round of this game. And it even has, I was impressed by this, sort of a felt sheet on top of the cardboard with sort of a soccer field printed on it. It is arranged into 3 rows. I will tell you right now, I don't know anything about playing soccer except that you're not supposed to use your hands except for the times when you can use your hands. You've got your forwards or your attackers, whatever it is. You've got your sort of midline, whatever the heck it is, and you've got your defenders. And then, of course, there is a slot for a goalie, although you may not have a goalie. So you've got those 3 rows, and then you also have 3 columns. You kind of have the wings, I believe it was called, where you can have 1 player in each of the 3 rows in each of those wings. Then you have the middle area where you can have up to 3 players. In that middle area, I believe up to 3. Maybe you can have all 5. I really don't know. But you can definitely have up to 3 in the middle of that board. What else do you have? Because I feel like there's a ton of stuff already that I'm forgetting. The game plays over 6 rounds. Each round plays in a week. You play Monday through Friday. In Monday, you literally draw a card from a deck. It's going to give you like a little kind of a random story scenario specific to you. You chuck a die, and I'm not going to go into details on how it works, but you refer to your 3 team owners, and based on the value of the die and the colors on their cards, that determines, 1 die roll, what you're going to activate, what outcome happens out of this card. Completely luck driven. A lot of them have negative effects, and there's not a damn thing you can do about them. That's your Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you do an action. That action might be hiring another team member. Another player. There's a market of 5 player cards. They're kind of these smaller Euro cards, and you take them and you sort of put them onto your bench. You got to pay for them. Each of these cards can be trained. You can get like a rookie, basically a young, what do they call a youngster, I think it was, that have almost no abilities, but you can train them into a better side, and then they may actually get some extra actions and things that they can do. You can hire kind of like standard player, and same thing, they can be upgraded, and then you cannot just hire, but there are ways to get veteran players who typically, when they upgrade, actually become worse because they kind of step back from playing and may provide other benefits to your team or to your company, but not necessarily on the field. You can get another crew member or a staff member. You can hire a staff member. They have a cost. Like I said, they play in at the bottom of your player board, and they'll adjust the operating costs of your business, but they may give you extra actions. You can also get a sponsorship. You can take a sponsorship card. There's a number of those, 5 of those on display, as well as 5 of the staff members. And those can get tucked into your, well, So there's a couple different things that you can do with those cards. You can play them just like, I'm just going to activate this card and I discard it, just usually get a couple of dollars. You can tuck it into your stadium and actually make it a banner at your stadium, and that will give you a slightly lesser benefit. Or you can trigger the text that's on that card, usually a one-time ability that might be fairly powerful, but you only do one of those two things. Or you can make it your company's uniform. The other side of those cards, the top side of those cards, have a artwork on it. They're all made up except for that there are Watch It Played cards, there are Portal Games cards, there's even a Dice Tower promo card. And so literally you can make your team uniform the Dice Tower logo. I did think that was pretty cool. And in that case, you get, again, a slightly lesser benefit, but then also the text that's on that card. You kind of get both things. And I'll try to remember to circle back to that. So that's what you can do. And then there's probably some other actions I'm forgetting. Again, some of the staff members may have actions. You've also got a bunch of these different resources you're collecting. And that's one of the things I forgot to mention on that middle board of your play area are a bunch of these different resource tracks. I don't even remember what they're all called. One of them gives you money. One of them brings you fans. The other one gives you these kind of like gear looking sort of things. I think it's called influence. And then the other one is kind of like this fisting, like a muscle, a building arm. Sorry, let's do it that way. Nothing there. And those resources are used for different things throughout the game. Mostly the blue ones, the muscles, are used to actually get your team members on the field. So if every team member that you want to field in a game, you have to spend one of those tokens on. And I was getting to that to explain that, you can spend the green tokens, the kind of gear looking thing, to take an extra action on your turn, although there may often be additional costs for doing that. So that is kind of a neat thing. I did kind of like that. Okay, well, I really need to do all these things. If I manage my resources a little carefully, maybe I can get some extra stuff done, upgrade my stadium, get some good players out there, et cetera, et cetera. Then you get to Friday. On Friday, you're going to staff up your field. You're always going to have 10 players, but they may not necessarily have a card. So if you have a player card that you want to play, each card is going to have a number on it, and you're going to put that number on the field. Your players can either be kickers, basically they're trying to score, or they have shields, so they are defenders. No matter what row they're really in. So even though you have a defender's row in the field, you could still have a kicker in there. So really the rows don't matter. You're going to set up your field as best you can. And believe me, it is really, really complicated, and I'm not going to go into it because I would be here for 10 more minutes. Once you've got your field laid out the way that you want, you even have a tactics card, or maybe more than one tactics card, which tells you how you have to arrange your field. So I had one for the longest time that said I had to have 3 guys in the backfield, 5 in the middle, and 2 in the front line, basically right at the enemy's or the opponent's goal net, whatever you want to call it. And I had to keep using that. Finally, towards the end of the game, I got one more tactics card, which let me kind of change up my strategy a little bit. You've got a deck of cards in front of you, specifically 6 cards, and these are all the opponents that you're going to face in the game. All of you have, or should have, the same 6 opponents, just organized in a way that you're never playing the same team. No 2 players are playing against the same team in the same round. That card gives you a little bit of a tip, a little bit of a hint into what that opponent might be, what their strength is, what their weakness is, how they play. It's barely a paragraph. And then once you've got your team, your field laid out the way you want it, you flip over that card. That card is going to show you the same thing that you're seeing, but upside down, because it's going to show you all the attackers and defenders the way that the opponent's is laid out. You're then going to go through your field, and if there's a specific way you're supposed to do it, I don't know what it is. For whatever reason, I was going right to left, top to bottom. You're going to first check all your kickers. If I have a kicker in an area of the board, let's say the front line right wing, I check to see if the opponent has a player in that same area on their card. And if they do, if mine's a kicker and theirs is a defender, then I have to see who has the strongest value. I've got to reference my card. If there is a card, if there isn't a card, then my default strength is a 1. I then check the defensive value of the player printed on that card. If theirs is equal to or higher than my strength, they block my kick. If there is no player there, or if it's a kicking player, or if it is weaker than my player, then my kick goes to the goal. And then that card is going to show me if the opponent has a goalie, what its level is, and how many glove icons they have. By the way, does this sound like it's a lot? Because it's a lot. If they have a glove and they are equal to or higher than my level, they can block that kick. And I have to make a note of how many gloves that goalie has used, because once they're out of gloves, they can no longer block any more shots for the rest of the round. And I do this for every single one of my kicking players on the board. I kind of spin them upside down when they've been resolved, so I know I already handled them. For every, of course, kick that does not get blocked either by a defensive player or by the goalie with a glove, I score a point. Then I got to do the whole damn thing in reverse. I have to go through each one of their opponents on the card, find out where the kickers are. Do I have a defender? If I do, is it strong enough? If not, it goes to my goalie. Does the goalie exceed or meet their strength? It does or doesn't. Okay, how many gloves do I have? I got to keep track of my own spent gloves. And same thing, I score for every one of their points. Then you may have other additional things throughout the game that are going to maybe give you extra scores or do whatever. I had a player that said if I had sold out my stadium, if I had all my bleachers built and they were filled, then that player would score an extra goal right at the very end of the game, which was cool. That was nice. That all happened simultaneously, which of course means that you really have no idea if everyone's playing correctly or fairly. You really have no idea. And then you finally get done. You're supposed to say, okay, did I win or lose my game? There's an overall rankings board for the entire sort of table. If you won your game, you get a couple of points. If it was a draw, then you get 1 point. If you lost, you don't get anything. And then you also resolve the rankings for the sort of AI opponents that you played against. Because at the end of the game, the overall rankings is going to give you points based on where you are, plus any points that you get from your own game, which could come from stadium upgrades. It can come from staff members. The staff members actually have their own little set collection aspect to them. So literally, if I hired a bunch of yellow people, I can get a bunch of in-game scoring on that. You can also just get scoring for upgrading the office, which doesn't do anything for you. It just gives you points at the end of the game. And there's probably a bunch of other stuff that I've left out. Whew, I need a drink. I didn't really care for this game. I was kind of like on the fence with it, until I was busting my ass to try and get the last bleacher built in my stadium and try to get my fandom track, income track, whatever you want to call it, to level 4. So at the beginning of each round, I would get 4 fans, which is exactly what I needed to fill my stadium. Because if my stadium was filled, then that guy, member, would give me an extra point at the end of each of my soccer matches. And I had gotten it. I had the bleachers built, I had the fans, whatever, everything was ready. And then I drew that event card on a Monday, and it said, okay, roll the die to see what's going to happen. There was some conflict, whatever, blah, 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 whatever. And again, I'm not going to go into detail on how it works because it's just too complicated, but I rolled the die and I got the worst possible outcome. Not only that, but the middle income, which I had kind of built an engine to benefit me if I rolled the middle outcome, literally said, keep rolling until you get one of these two extremes, the worst or the best possible outcome. And even then, it wasn't really, like I say, each one kind of had a negative. So I wanted the middle outcome and I literally couldn't get it no matter what. But the worst possible outcome for me was losing some of my income on that fandom. Completely random, dice chuck, I'm stuck with it, and I turned to my buddy Chris, and I was like, okay, this is now a negative review for me. Because I hate games that just don't give you, it's just pure random dumb luck. It's like, oh, what's the game I used to? Munchkin Soccer. I couldn't do anything about it. Now, luckily, it actually gave me another effect, and that effect was to like take a sponsor and get its benefit. So I took the sponsor and I took its benefit because we didn't understand the sponsorship rules correctly. We had gotten some rules wrong in the teach. A lot of those we didn't really understand until much later in the game. And so there were a lot of things that we were doing wrong with the sponsorships. We also were going into end-game scoring and suddenly revealed that some of the players were supposed to be generating points if certain things happened during a game. None of us knew that. None of us scored that. And so that was a big letdown. And all of this came down to a few things. The table space consumed by this game was absurd. I've got a couple of pictures of just how much crap we had on this board. On the table, 3 boards in front of us, rows of cards all over the place. I started to have, 8 or so different players on my team. I couldn't place them out next to the field without literally starting to lay them on top of Chris's boards. The market in front of you is just cards everywhere. Even just putting everything back into where it went after the game was over took over 20 minutes. And he had a really nice organizer to keep it all nice and neat. And it still took forever to get everything back where it was supposed to go. So it was a huge table hog. That soccer match play thing at the end of the round was interesting conceptually. When it was such a massive pain in the ass to resolve each thing. Yeah, I can turn my players upside down to indicate what's been activated and what hasn't. I can't do anything with this card that represents this opponent. I made the comment at one point that I almost kind of wish I had an extra set of pieces that I could actually lay out the match on the table. It would be way easier to maintain, but it would add another 10 minutes to that step. So that was ridiculous. There were tons of just, I even read the rule book at one point, trying to figure out how the goalies worked. And that was another thing, was that 2 of us managed to get goalies. The other 2 players never managed to get goalies. They kept being pissed at us because we had goalies. All the rest of the other goalies were at the bottom of the deck, and there was no way to get to them. And that's just stupid. I mean, it's like, how do you go into a point where, okay, we're playing this big game about soccer and no one can get a goalie? It just doesn't make any sense. You kind of have like a default. If you don't have one, you just kind of have a standard 1 strength, 1 defense goalie. Which, again, you got to just remember that you have. You have no way to mark it or indicate it. You have no way to track what you've used and what you haven't with some of that stuff. And it was just stupid fiddly. And all of that wrapped up in what tried to kind of be an engine-building game. You never really felt like you had a whole lot of control over things. You get 3 actions in a round. It's a grand total of basically 18 things that you can do. Like I said, you can possibly spend some extra actions to get stuff done. But even then, it was kind of a crapshoot. A lot of the resources felt very tight. Which, that's not even like a big problem. Like, that's kind of, for a Euro game, okay, that kind of makes sense. Make things a little bit more of a challenge. But I don't know. I felt like in what is one of the most profitable sports on the planet, to like not be able to raise money was kind of a little ridiculous. I could only put 2 advertisers in. You could upgrade to put a 3rd. 3 whole advertisers. How much advertising they do in soccer? So I didn't care for this game. It did not click for me at all. Now, I don't know if they're going to send me a peace prize to change the way I think about that game, but I'm just not going to worry about that. Anyways, moving on. That was 11, Football Manager board game. The last one to chat about, oh my God, this is getting really heavy. I played SETI, and I forgot to grab behind me the box for the expansion. I'll try and stick that up here in the corner. But we played this with the new Space Agencies expansion just today. My wife and I played this. And a quick side story, the other table at the library played this game, and I really wish I had played that instead, especially since the 11 Football Manager game took us 4 hours to play. Anyways, I really, really wanted to play this with the new Space Agencies expansion. SETI is quickly becoming one of my favorite games. This is from Chex Games Edition. It has some similarities to, I'm blanking on the name of it. Nope, I can't remember. It's just, I said it like 3 times today and I've completely forgotten. It's one of the treasure-seeking games. I'll throw it down here in the screen. It's getting late. I'm getting tired. I apologize. But anyways, this is a game about trying to find extraterrestrial intelligence. You're always going to find two sort of aliens, and they're not freakishly like cartoonish or sci-fi. They're kind of a little bit more rooted in reality, but it is very much a sort of action efficiency type game. As I've mentioned this many times in the past, it is a game where, yeah, I can just go ahead and play this card and pay 2 coins, and now I'm out of coins. I got that card played. Okay, that was great. And now I'm kind of out of stuff. But instead, I can maybe discard this other card to get up this track that's going to let me spend something, that's going to get me one of these technologies, that's going to let me do something else. And now I'm going to have a bunch of extra money. Now I can play this card for that 2 money, and maybe even trigger something else on the side, and I actually have way more things. I have more resources available to me now by taking a different course, through these kind of turns, and I can get more done in this round. So I'm not going to talk too much about SETI. I will talk quickly about the Space Agency's expansion. And what I'll say is that it adds a couple of modules, as is kind of typical with these types of expansions. It does add 3 new alien boards. I'm going to show you 2 of them in this photo, but I'm not spoiling anything. I'm not going to tell you how they play. You're going to see these components just punching it out if you were to buy this expansion. So I'm not really spoiling anything. Like I said, I won't tell you how they play, though. I intentionally put 2 of them into this game. I didn't use any of the alien boards from the base game because I did want to check out specifically how the expansion works. It does also add agency cards, so you're actually now going to have some asymmetrical abilities that you start off the game with. I had one that was a bit more of a challenging one. Basically, anytime that I would play a card as my main action, I would get to sort of claim a little bit of a benefit from my player board, my agency board, and then as a free action during each round, I could wipe those tokens off of that board and claim them again. And in fact, I also got to draw a card when I did that, and I forgot to do that many times, so I actually kind of hurt myself a little bit there. My wife had a card where she could, and this was a neat ability, she could, as a one-time action each round, swap a card in her hand with a card that is out on the display. It is somewhat difficult to get cards from the display. You can't just buy a card. Lost Ruins of Arnak. That was it. I remember. It's not like Lost Ruins of Arnak, and then it's not a deck builder, so you can't just buy a card. But she had the ability where if she just really wanted that card, she could just swap, and that was really pretty neat. And like I said, like Lost Ruins of Arnak, this is a game where it's all about that efficiency, trying to do things in a very optimal way to get the most out of your resources. The last thing that I can mention significantly of this is that it adds, on top of the agency cards, it adds quick start cards. You're going to get 3 of these at the beginning of the game. You're going to pick 2 of them. The top half of the card is going to let you basically start to get some things out and play. Like I started off with a couple of sectors already scanned. My wife and I started off with a probe already in orbit at a planet. We don't get any of those bonuses. We just start with those pieces out there. Excuse me. And then hopefully you can sort of take those starting cards that you have and sort of, okay, now I'm going to start off with a couple of things already in mind versus literally you just get a hand of cards and a couple of resources and the game says go when you play in the base mode. Interestingly enough, if you play with the quick start and the agencies, it strongly suggests, it tells you to leave out the first round of play. So it turns this from a 5-round game into a 4-round game. I would tell you that I don't think that makes the game any quicker. Now, possibly, I kind of had to reteach this to my wife. It had been a while since she played. And there's a little extra time in sort of thinking through the different choices, the different things that you're shooting, your agencies, your starting cards, all that kind of stuff, which cards you're going to possibly tuck as income. And I think that kind of makes up for some of the time that you would otherwise spend in that first round of play. So it was still a very, very long game. Even I hit a little bit of AP in this because I'm trying to pick that optimal path through the actions that I kind of have available to me. I did have a great scoring game with this. Like I said, I really did like, especially one of the 2 these new aliens that we encountered. I really did like the way that they played, just some unique ideas. And I kind of see where they even may have come up with some ideas in this that I could see paving the way for even more expansions going forward. This is a game that I would love an expansion that just adds like 10 more aliens. Each one unique. All of these have felt very unique. And if I could just explore more of that, if I could just have more weirdness every time I played this game, I would absolutely love it. Like I said, I'm just really, really enjoying this game. I had a really, really good play of it this time. My poor wife, that action efficiency is really just not her strength. And so she definitely struggled with this. And if you look at the scoreboard in the pictures that I've shown, it looks like she beat me by about 5. But my point token was on 200 and hers is on 100. But she said just to tell everyone that she narrowly beat me by 5 points, and I'm going to let her have that. So anyways, that was SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And I will mention just real quick, I'm not going to go into this because it is spoiler laden. But my daughter and I today actually got caught up. We were way behind on the Advent calendar, the Intergalactic Race. This is an exit calendar from the Cosmos Company. This is, I think, now the fourth one that we've done. I think there's only 5 of these available. If you have not checked these out, I really do recommend them. And I will say this, we have done 4 of these. Usually by this time, I'm kind of done with it. The puzzles I'm just getting tired of trying to solve some of these puzzles. I kind of want to just immediately jump to the cheat sheet, get a couple of hints, and figure it out. Today, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's been a long weekend. Today we got caught up through a bunch of these puzzles, and I was kind of running back and forth. I was helping my wife do some baking and helping my daughter with some puzzles. And I will say that this is one of the most inventive and creative challenges I've seen yet. We did some bonkers stuff over the past 2 weeks or so with some of the puzzles in this box, and it's just been a lot of fun. So if the exit calendars, if the exit games aren't really your thing, first of all, they're all beginner level. They're all made for kids and families and that kind of thing to work with. Some of them have just been like, I would have never thought about that in a million years. And some of them are just like immediately, okay, yeah, I know what's going to happen. In fact, even my daughter is getting the knack for these things. She kind of starts reading and she goes, oh, I know what we're going to have to do here. But this one's been a lot of fun. That is it for recently played games. That is it for the Weekly Ratchet, which is good because apparently I need to have a nap. But hey, question of the week for next week. Upcoming is Christmas. And I'm going to keep this one fun and lighthearted. What do you hope Santa has under the tree for you? Bonus points if it's a board game. All right, that is it for question of the week. That is it for the episode. Thank you so much for watching, folks. Absolutely, from the bottom of my heart, from all of our family here in Ashland, Virginia, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I hope I will see you the weekend after Christmas. If I don't, then a Happy New Year to you as well. And I will be back with the next episode as soon as I possibly can. I'm going to simply leave it at that. Thanks for watching, folks. Cheers.